Iguodala to Curry, back to Iguodala, up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. Curry, one-on-one, Irving puts it up. It's good. Kyrie Irving from downtown. The three, steps back, crossover, puts up a three. Rebound James. Second. It's over. It's over. Cleveland is a city of champions once again. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.
Cleveland! This is for you!
What's up, Cavs fans? Welcome to another offseason edition of the Block the Shot to Stop here with Skylar Webker. I am Kevin Lynch. We are here. We're actually going to start a series of a podcast, kind of a themed podcast tonight. And that's like basically doing a spotlight on each player on the Cavs roster from this past year, particularly the ones that we see not only on the team, but possibly having their roles increase for next season. And Skylar, I think we picked the perfect two guys to do for the first episode of this series.
No doubt. I think this series or this episode of the series, we're going to cover Craig Porter Jr. and Jaylon Tyson, two guys that were kind of fringe in the roster, back and forth with the G League and the Cavs this year. We'll go over how we see them fitting into this team this coming year, and hopefully how Colby Altman sees them fitting into this team this year.
Sure. I think the one other common thread they have is just potential, and they showed you glimmers of what they can do this past year at different times. They're very different players, but they're the same in the fact that they, both played 3 to 4 years of college. Craig Porter Jr. bounced around a little bit, but they're both like they came into the league very athletic and a little bit raw, and have started to kind of, shape some of their potential. And you can see the possibility of what the player they could be and the player they could be that would really contribute to the Cavs.
Absolutely. We saw it not as much this year, but that first year with Craig Porter Jr., we really saw what he could deliver to this Cavs team. I think a lot of that is he took a lot of advice and mentorship with Ricky Rubio when he was on the Cavs team. I think he took a lot from that type of mentorship. And I'm hoping that we see that type of player out of Craig Porter Jr. going forward. I think if we can see that on a consistent basis, I think that not only helps our depth, especially with Darius Garland to miss kind of the first month or so of the season, but just another weapon in the offense that can run an offense. We don't need Craig Porter Jr. to be the scoring monster. We need another person that can symphonically run the offense. And I think we can get that.
I agree with you. And yeah, like jumping in on Craig, I agree with you. We didn't see nearly as much of Craig this past year as we did 2 years ago. That was kind of because of the health of the rest of the Cavs team and the depth that this team had compared to 2 years ago. But I thought Cam looked more polished this year, even in a more limited role. And he's kind of turned himself into a little bit more of a modern NBA player. He is a little bit, smaller stature, and he originally was like the majority of his game is just attacking the basket, which isn't a bad thing. But in the NBA nowadays, as a guard, you have to develop a reliable 3-point shot to be a real contributor. I mean, it's just the way the game's played. And you could see, like, one of the stats that jumped out to me the most, kind of comparing his 2 years with the Cavs, was just like his shot percentage. Like in that first year, over 85% of his shots were 2-point shots. This past year, it was about 65% were 2-point shots. So he took 2.5 times as many threes as he did for, when you kind of break it down to like playing time and everything than he did the previous season. And I thought his 3-point shot looked really good. I mean, smooth, is probably never going to be the greatest you've ever seen, but he certainly looked the part to be respectable enough on threes, or even above average on threes, that would kind of allow the rest of his game to come into place, like his using his athleticism, attacking the basket, those kind of things that you mentioned.
Yeah, if he can stretch the floor and really get guys to guard him on the perimeter where he can either hit a shot or blow past him and use the athleticism and drive to the hoop. I mean, that adds another wrinkle to him as a player and to the offense. And I think that's something that could be kind of that spark plug off the bench, like we saw with Ty Jerome. The future is the future. We don't know what the Cavs are going to do with Ty Jerome, but
Sure.
if you can get a guy that can just be a spark plug off that bench, run a second unit, I think more guys that you have like that is not a bad thing. I think they could have something there with if he's able to kind of piece all these elements of his game together.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of it's on Craig, but as far as how he further develops going into next season. But some of what his role will be is kind of out of his control, right? The Cavs have 2 free agents, Sam Merrill and particularly Ty Jerome, that them coming back or not would greatly vary the opportunity that Craig would have going this season. Another thing that I guess, works in his favor as far as opportunity goes is we've covered Darius Garland's going to be out at least the first month of the season, probably longer than that. I think we all agree, which means even if they bring Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill back or bring in other guards, they're going to be, there's going to be 30 to 35 minute point guard minutes available that usually aren't, with Garland being out. So I think those things are, we'll see about the free agents. We do kind of know about Garland, but I think there's a lot of, kind of tea leaves there that lead you to think like Craig Porter is going to get his best opportunity to be an NBA contributor this season, especially early in the season.
And it helps to have the offensive coaching staff that Kenny Atkinson has and the offensive coaching system that he has. Because Craig Porter came in under the bigger staff era, which is, as we know, just super be defensive oriented, to now go to pretty much a 180 flip as a player to being more offensive focused, more playmaking focused. I think that's really going to help another year of development in Craig Porter Jr., just having this kind of coaching staff around him.
I completely agree. Kind of on the flip side a little bit, I think some of Craig's not only opportunity, but his ability to thrive will kind of depend on the roster construction a little bit. We've highlighted, and everybody's highlighted, the fact that with the Cavs playing 2 smaller in stature guards, like how everyone else kind of has to kind of fit in around that, and how they've struggled with perimeter defense and everything. So, some of Craig's opportunity might be determined by who is on the roster. Are they going to have, 3-4 guards that are under 6'2" or under 6'3"? If that's the case, all of them aren't going to get consistent playing time. That being said, like, Craig is incredibly athletic. Like, he is, lack of a better term, sneaky athletic, to where you don't really see it coming, but man, can he explode off of his feet, especially trying to finish at the rim. I thought, just at times over these last 2 years, it's just, you can see it. You can see a guy who, I think his best role is that like first guard, maybe second guard off the bench that just comes in and plays like crazy for 15, 18 minutes a game and gives you a fusion of athleticism. He's the type of guy I would love to see him next year when he gets the opportunity. Just pick up full court, be that kind of guy that's going to, infuse life into a team and be a pest to the other team, that like, I'm going to come in and, even if I don't force a turnover, I'm just going to wear down the guard on the other team, the 6-minute stretch that I'm going to be in, because, he's going to be playing longer than I will. So I'm just going to come in and give him hell for the time that I'm matched up against him. That's one thing I would love to see Craig just like, increase his aggressiveness both on offense and defense. Cause I do think the skill is there. And I think, when skill, work, and opportunity, come together, I think Craig Porter Jr. could surprise people, not to necessarily the level that Ty Jerome did this year, but I think he could be the biggest surprise contributor from the Cavs roster next year?
Yeah, I think he would definitely be past the high energy, high like just drive guy. I think another piece that he would have to, I think he needs to improve on is the I don't know what it's called, but like the level headedness of whenever you have playoff dudes giving
Yeah.
you attention, not
Mhm.
being shaken or rattled. I think that's another
Yeah.
piece of that. And obviously, it comes with just development and
Sure.
playing NBA games. But I think that's another piece to really put Craig Porter Jr. kind of like in the NBA player, perennial NBA player territory.
I agree. And I think not only like handle that, I think he could flip that script. Like, I think, yes, he did get rattled, some last year when he was faced with a lot of pressure and aggressive defense and everything. And so on one hand, you could say, okay, he needs to get a little bit tighter with his handle and all that kind of thing. I think he just needs to flip and go from being the person who's getting pressured to the person who gives pressure. We talked about the Cavs, like, just didn't apply force and pressure the way other playoff teams did this year. I think Craig Porter is a guy that could do that because of his athleticism and what his role would be. And, if they can get that out of him, be the guy who, you know, forces mistakes by the other team, or at least just kind of gets in their head a little bit. Um, I think that like increases his role mostly because the Cavs don't have a lot of those guys. They've tried to make Isaac Okoro that kind of guy. We were talking before the show that the Cavs need an Aaron Nesmith, a Lou Dort, a Jaden McDaniels, that kind of elite defensive, or people say 3-and-D, but really it starts with the defense for me. And the opportunity for guys like Craig Porter Jr. and Jaylon Tyson, who we're going to talk about in a minute, is there if they can at least partly fill that role, because that is looking at the Cavs roster. We said it before the season, and the season ended the same way. That's the biggest opportunity on the Cavs roster for someone to slide into, someone to be signed or traded for to fill that role, is that aggressive perimeter defense, and average to above average offensive contributor.
Yeah, and I think he could be, I would say the pass with I think he's much more on the offensive end because of his smaller size, but I think, a great segue to Jaylon Tyson. I think that's something that Jaylon Tyson can be really good at. That's something that we saw a lot of flashes of, that being good and aggressive on the perimeter while still being offensively efficient. I think that's something that in the limited time that we saw him, I mean, for a moment there, we were thinking he's the best guy out of his draft class because he was playing really well, and everybody else in his draft class wasn't. But I still think that in him, that he can have that 3-and-D energy and really contribute, maybe not in a large minutes right away, just coming into year 2, but more than we saw, at least being on this team and not kind of back and forth in a G League situation. I think that's something that he could really, really like benefit from, and the Cavs could benefit from.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, the two words I think for me that describe Jaylon Tyson perfectly is raw talents, because he is talented. He talented both like athletically and as a actual basketball player, but he is super raw. I mean, there were parts at the beginning of the season I wasn't totally sure he'd be able to dribble 3 consecutive times in an NBA game without getting it stolen or off his foot or anything like that. You could tell he was getting more comfortable as the season went along. I thought as the season went along, just his shooting form looked better. His confidence, you could tell, was picking up a little bit. And, if the Cavs do look to trade like Isaac Okoro, Dean Wade or something, Jaylon Tyson is the best kind of profile to fill that role the Cavs need. He is a big wing that is super athletic, and he is like, I think he is kind of aggressive by nature. He just needs to get instilled with a little bit more confidence and have the, loosen the purse strings on him a little bit.
Yeah, and that it goes back to Kenny and his staff. I think another year of development, another year of being around guys like Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, and even having somebody like DeAndre Hunter on this team, even though he's kind of soft spoken, I think he provides a lot of insight because he's not a rook in the league. He's been in this league for a minute now, so he's got some wisdom that he can distill upon Jaylon Tyson in this kind of 3-and-D role, which he has sat in forever in Atlanta.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I actually think Jaylon Tyson and Craig Porter Jr. might be second on this list, but I think he has the number one opportunity to see how much his role increases from last year to next year. He, like I said, he fills a need the Cavs desperately have. And, with the Cavs being in the second apron, there's lots of talks of deals they could make. There's a very good possibility that they're not going to be able to fill that need through free agency or through a trade or something. And that perimeter defense is going to have to come from like roster development. And I think like Jaylon is the number one guy for that. And I think for him, I think he has lots of potential on offense. I really liked how his game came along. I think he's going to be, his 3-point shot looked good. I don't think he's ever going to be a guy who like breaks people down off the dribble, but he could be a really good cutter, really good, like sneaky offensive rebounder, contribute in a lot of those ways. But I just think, if the Cavs bring back the roster pretty much intact from last year, he is the number one guy I would look to see his role increase the most.
Yeah. If I had to put a prediction on it, I think the Cavs retain Ty Jerome, let Sam Merrill walk, which opens up a door in that guard 2 position within the within the bench. I think they might trade Isaac Okoro or Dean Wade, one of, if not both. But then let's just say our bench is Ty Jerome, Craig Porter Jr., Jaylon Tyson, DeAndre Hunter, and pick a 5 that they go get because it's got to be better than Tristan Thompson.
Right.
I think that's a pretty good bench.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, I know we've talked about defense a lot, and it's, the end of the floor that gets talked about significantly less in the NBA. But I do think the Cavs had the number one offense in the league this year and got outed in the second round. And I think it's natural to look at them and say there's at least parts of the defense that they really need to improve upon, and parts of, kind of the roster construction, the way they play, to be a little bit more playoff ready. They're obviously regular season ready. They're obviously incredibly talented, and there's a decent chance they could be a top 1 or 2 seed again next year. Pretty decent chance. But we keep talking about defense because one, not only is it the need for the Cavs, but you're probably going to get it based on what we're talking about here. But guess which 2 Cavs had the best defensive rating on the team?
I'm going to go with Jaylon Tyson and Craig Porter Jr.
That is correct. Both of them had were very, very good defensively in the time that they that they did get. And I was kind of surprised. Like, I did not realize Jaylon Tyson appeared in 47 games. I think it was because it was so sporadic, where it seemed like he would play 5 or 6 games in a row, then you wouldn't see him for 5 or 6 games. And I think it all came in like little stretches. We know he went down and played with the Charge a couple of times. I want to say he played about a half dozen games with them. But the fact that he got in 47 games, some of them was just garbage time minutes. Other games, like, when the Cavs were shorthanded, he got kind of surprisingly important minutes in the regular season, and usually responded pretty well. So yeah, I'm excited for Jaylon Tyson. I think you and Tim were both a little bit higher on him coming into the year, because I thought kind of what I think now about Jaylon Tyson. He was raw talent, but last year raw was the capital letter word. And this year, I think talent is the capital letter word. I still think he has raw talent, but I think he's moving closer to, utilizing that talent and everything. And like, sometimes it's not just developing your skill set. He doesn't necessarily have to become a better dribbler or a better passer or anything. It's like finding where you excel, like be great at what you're great at kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if he comes in, focuses on defense, focuses on improving his 3-point shot, which got significantly better as the year went on, and finding ways to contribute offensively off the ball, because just with the roster that the Cavs have, he's not going to be on the ball a whole lot.
Yeah.
If he could do those 3 things, he could go from being, a spot player, not playing at times, to a 15+ minute a game guy. I'm very confident in that for next year.
Yeah, if he can, like you said, dial in that 3-point shot and really put a focus on his defensive end of the game,
Mm-hmm.
Imagine him and DeAndre Hunter, both 3-and-D guys, coming off your bench. I mean, that's pretty good, with Ty Jerome being your point guard, distributing to everybody. I think that's going to be really tough to beat, and especially because all these NBA teams haven't figured out Jaylon Tyson yet. I mean, you kind of get a little bit of a edge now. That kind of goes out the window by the time the playoffs come. Everybody has enough film and enough tape on you by that point. But
sure,
I think it's like you said, what we've always wanted from Isaac Okoro. If he can kind of take that spot, then I think this offense really, really starts humming, especially during the bench, when the bench mob gets in there.
Yeah, and for the sake of this conversation, we'll say they bring the team back pretty intact. At least they're bringing back the big 4, a lot of the other guys and everything. The one thing I think this Cavs team roster construction has been phenomenal, right? The way that they've gotten the big 4, their stars, they've developed a lot of really good role players, made some good signings, good trades, all that stuff. The one thing I don't think they've done yet is find the perfect 5th player with the big 4. I think they have a lot of guys who are good players who can fit in, but I don't think they've ever found the guy who perfectly complements the big 4, and that's who you close the game with, right? And so, just based on his youth and potential and the other guys on the roster, like Jaylon Tyson might be next guy up to see if he can develop into that perfect guy. Like I really like Max Strus. I like DeAndre Hunter. I like Dean Wade a lot. It's like, I like all these players. I just don't know that any of them are the best 5th guy to go with, who are the core 4 for the Cavs.
Man, you're going from he's going to go from G League to hopefully being a starter, get Max Strus into the bench. Man, that's a leap.
I could see, actually, a realistic thing for Jaylon Tyson, and I am very high on him, is he is immediately a contributor. Like he's in the rotation. Even if it said this is the 9th, 10th guy, he's getting 12, 15 minutes a game at the start, and then just ticks up a little bit. I don't necessarily think he'll be a starter by the end of the year, but I think he could be a guy who at least is in the conversation as a closing in the closing 5. One of those guys who you can deploy him more in the right matchups. And do it with a lot of confidence, that if he can be, if he can use his athleticism to offer the Cavs some flexibility with their roster, play up, play down a position, and then now all of a sudden that's a great way that you get more minutes, is if you can make yourself, position versatile and skill set versatile. So I don't think he's going to go from G League to Eastern Conference MVP or something like that for next year. But I do think the best version of Jaylon Tyson, which we hope he grows into over the next 2, 3, 4 seasons, is a guy who is those guys that we talked about, like Aaron Nesmith, Jaden McDaniels. All of those guys are guys who were, a lot of them were picks in the 20s of the first round, same as Jaylon Tyson. A lot of them were brought in kind of raw, and it took, a little while for them to develop. None of them came in and made an instant impact year 1. So I would love to see him just take the first step towards becoming one of those guys, just high level perimeter defender. If you can get to like just above average offensive contributor, if he is a 5.5, 6 out of 10 offensive contributor and did high level perimeter defense, that is a great player for this Cavs team to have as they're presently constructed.
Yeah, I mean that's the type of player that you would put on Tyrese Halliburton and say,
Sure.
don't leave his side, shut him down all series, and that'd be the kind of guy that they could have used this year, but a guy that they're going to need next year because Indiana's not going anywhere. Boston's probably blown it up, but New York's not going anywhere. Indiana's not going anywhere. The Magic are only getting better.
Oh yeah, Orlando got better. Yeah.
So I think that's a guy that you're right. We desperately need to find or develop or one of the either.
Yeah, and well, when you start thinking of what the Cavs need for next year, you start with that unfortunate series where they got punked by the Pacers, right? They were just outplayed, out physicaled. And if you're looking at this roster and you squint hard enough, Porter Jr. and Tyson could potentially be your Neesmith and Nembhard down the line. Like maybe not to that level of player. Maybe neither of them are like starters and that, but like those type of players that like just put pressure on the other team, that become high level perimeter defenders and find ways to contribute offensively, when needed. And I just think they're the type of players the Cavs need, just like uber athletic, aggressive guys who can, use their athleticism and make an impact on the defense. A lot of times the Cavs defense was good this year because of Evan Mobley and kind of scheme. Like they did a lot of zone. They, but you saw in the playoffs, like when there's no more scheming to do and everything, and you just need somebody to go and body up and play great defense. Like the Cavs didn't have that guy on the perimeter. And maybe somebody else will develop into it next year. I just like I said, looking at the roster, looking for guys who I think have a lot of room to develop and have like, the skill set to become those kind of players. These are the two guys I think of. And so I think if all goes right for the Cavs, both of these guys are in the top 9 or 10 in the rotation next year. And they're giving the Cavs an element, really the biggest element that the team didn't have this season.
I agree. I think these are the two guys that obviously they're going to be on the roster next year because Craig Porter Jr. had signed an extension 2 years ago or something like that. Jaylon Tyson's on his rookie deal. I know that they have to make a decision on Luke Travers and Imani Bates.
Sure.
We'll see what they do there, but these guys are definitely on the roster next year.
Yeah.
Hopefully they take those steps forward to be on the team in a meaningful way next year.
Well, and a lot of Cavs fans know this, but we should mention, like, there's most likely no other real young guys that are going to be challenging them, right? Because the Cavs don't have a first round pick this year. They do have 2 second round picks, late in the second round.
As of this moment.
Yeah. And maybe they strike oil with one of them. It's definitely possible. But for right now, if you're looking at who are the young guys who could make a leap in what they contribute next year, these are the 2 guys. They are the 2 guys. A lot of this Cavs roster, not saying they can't get better, but there's just less room between their current and their peak ability. These guys, I think there's an argument to be made that there is a wide gap between what they are now and what the best version of each of them as a player is.
Yeah, I mean, this right here is their floor, and
right.
we know that their ceiling is much beyond the floor.
Right. Well, yeah, I think these were the perfect 2 guys to start with. I mean, I think most people would think if we were doing Cavs spotlights, we would start with Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell and everything, but like we know what we're going to get from Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley next year. We expect Evan to get a little bit better on offense and everything, but like we wanted to start with kind of the guys that are the wild cards on this roster, right? And so I think these were perfect guys. That being said, we are going to cover everyone that is under contract for next year. We will do an episode on Sam Merrill and Ty Jerome before free agency opens to kind of what their impact was and, where they might fit if they do come back or maybe why they wouldn't. And with that, we have a lot more off-season content. Skylar and I are going to talk about my newest idea after the show, and if he likes it, you'll hear about it soon enough. But no, we have a lot of creative stuff coming on. Tim, our partner, is going to do a little bit of a draft breakdown that might already be out before this episode is. But if that's the case and you don't see it, you can go back and listen to that. And we'll definitely talk about, what the Cavs did in the draft on the episode next week and make sure we have, content to go. Like I said, we're going to do a weekly episode all off season. If there's any kind of significant Cavs news, we'll happily do an extra one. We don't have a lot going on. We're dads, we have a lot going on at like 10 o'clock at night, like it is now recording. So yeah, with that, Skylar, anything else before we get out of here?
No, you hit it. I wanted to make sure we highlighted Tim and his excellent draft spotlight. For anybody that doesn't know, Tim is a huge college basketball guy. He knows everybody coming out into the draft. So that's an episode to definitely sink your teeth into and check out.
And Skylar and I are not. That's why Tim's doing it solo. I'm not speaking for Skylar, but I used to be a big college basketball guy. Still love March Madness, but the older you get, the less free time you have, and I choose to devote most of my free time to the Cavs and other things. So,
I agree. I've watched 0 minutes of college basketball in probably the past 5 years.
Wow. You should definitely just do your own preview just for fun. Then I mean, it's like a March Madness poll. You could just have good a chance to get it right as anybody else. All right, man. We'll get out of here. Thank you so much for staying with us and tuning in during the off season. Like I said, we'll be back next Tuesday and every Tuesday throughout the season. And if anything significant happens on draft night, we may drop an episode over the weekend covering that. So for Skylar Webker, I am Kevin Lynch. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Block the Shot to Stop. And as always,
go Cavs.